We're holding at the fourth tenet of Jewish belief. Ani mamid be'emunah shlema. I believe with absolute belief. Shaboris Baruch Shmo, the Creator, blessed is His name, Hu Rishon Hu Achron. He's the first and He's the last. We said every day in the morning service in Ezras, Emes ato Rishon v'ato Achron. It's true. You are the first and you're the last. Now, science is still trying to figure out where did it all begin. And they're coming up with all kinds of theories. The Big Bang Theory. But even though they come up with that, they still haven't figured out what caused the Big Bang. The Big Bang happened in the context of existence, whatever that existence may have been, but there was something. It was the context of something else. That's number one. Secondly, what caused the Big Bang? What caused this interaction which created this explosion, which allowed creation to evolve? They haven't figured that out. And they said, we haven't come there yet. Someday they'll figure it out. It's impossible to figure it out. Why? Because the concept of ex nihilo is a concept, it's not within the human faculty to deal with. We said vacuum nothingness is part of the context of creation. That is part of creation. Vacuum, waste, nothing, desolation, whatever way you want to visualize it in the most extreme level, it's something which is part of creation. It's existence. You visualize light, it's something. Anything you could visualize or understand or come upon, that itself is part of creation. So the Big Bang Theory, that's how it began. Okay, let's say that's how it began, but who caused it? We had said, if you believe in the Creator, and everything emanates from that Creator, whoever that Creator is, and that's where it all began. Firstly, you're miles ahead to understand that things are not random, and there's purpose and there's objective in existence. Because if there's a Creator, evidently, rationally speaking, he had reason to create. If you say things happen randomly, it's easier to find a needle in a haystack than understanding what the purpose of all existence is when you say it's all random, it just happened. But nobody directed or orchestrated what happened to happen. It was just the Big Bang. See, if you believe in the Creator, you don't have to come out to a Big Bang Theory. God himself is the Creator, and he creates as he chooses to create, with the precision, with the detail, with everything else. What's the reason? Because there's a certain evaluation, it's called carbon testing, and based on carbon testing, they figured out that existence evolved at over billions of years. Because if you unravel it, you go back to the one-cell animal, or to less than that, to the atomic particle. That's where you go back to. So I remember once heard somebody had asked someone, and this person was a simple human being, not a Jew. He says, what's so difficult? If you believe in God, and there's nothing beyond God's ability, what may take billions of years to evolve from the one-cell animal, if God is God, he can make something happen instantaneously. And the person, as God created Adam and Eve, he created two fully functional human beings. So there's no reason to say they evolved from the ape, and the ape from something, the stage before the ape, going back, tracing all back to the one-cell animal. What do you need it for? If you believe in God and he's a creator and there's nothing beyond his capacity, his capability, he created a world that normally takes 18 billion years. He created in an instant. Of course, he's the creator. If you believe he's the creator, and if you don't believe in the creator, then nothing makes sense. Everything's random. If you say the creator, he's Rishon. He's the first. Nothing preceded him. So where did it all begin? It all began with him. This is right now, we're not saying different than the first tenets. Where does everything emanate from him? Where does everything emanate from? From him. He's the source of everything. The energies which he releases and the way he chooses, they should manifest themselves. That's how they manifest themselves. And that's what they become. There's an energy for stone. There's an energy for vegetation. There's an energy for oxygen and various gases. Everything has its spiritual energy, which manifests itself in the physical, in a certain particular context, with a certain molecular structure, with an atomic structure, everything, down to the core of whatever it may be. But that's if you believe who Rishon. It all began with God. And who is God? God is the creator. Creator means ex nihilo. That means nothing preceded him. He was always here. This infinite being, which we said he's infinite. So I believe with absolute faith, who Rishon, he's the first. So if nothing preceded him, so where did it all begin? From where did it come? It came from him, because he's the first. And he directed it, and he dictated it, and he expressed it. And he allowed it to manifest itself as it did, at the pace that he wanted it to manifest itself. There's a word, it's called a decoy. A decoy is something which misleads you to take you somewhere else. Within creation, God planted many decoys. Because if you look at creation, and as science advances itself, the more they understand through science and through medicine, the more they realize they don't understand. If you have the peasant farmer in Poland, you say, how did this come about? He said, very simple. You take a seed, put it in the ground, and you fertilize it, and you water it, and that's how it comes about. Very simple. Does he understand the process of germination and photosynthesis and how the sun and all the elements interact together? And that's how you have your finished product, whether it's a vegetable or fruit. He has no idea. Very simple. You go get yourself the packet of seeds, plant them, flowers. The beautiful, the petals, colors. It's like magnificent. How did it happen? You look at a caterpillar. Caterpillar starts then it turns into a butterfly. It's unbelievable. How? Well, that's what happens. It's miraculous. Well, that's how evolution happened. It started as a caterpillar, turned into a butterfly. Except it happens within a few weeks after the caterpillar comes out of its larvae. Then all of a sudden that usually would take billions. That's only a replica of how evolution took place. So God puts many decoys. For instance, how do you tell the age of a tree? When you cut a tree, you cut timber, you look how many rings are inside the base of the tree. And based on those rings, you know how many years that tree has been growing. So if you went and you had the California redwood, which was as wide as the roadway, say this tree must have been growing 20 million years. Whatever you want to say, because if you count the rings, that's where it comes out. And if you know your mathematics, and each ring represents, you can only count to 5, and each ring represents 1,000,000 years. You know the tree is 5,000,000 years old because you count to 5. Because each ring represents 1,000,000 years. I'm being very facetious. Okay? But all that God put there, these are all decoys. See, this proves it. No, proves nothing. It's either a decoy, because maybe it's not really foolproof, what you think. As carbon testing has been disproved that it's not accurate, it's only because they assume certain presumptions, and therefore they start at a certain point. If you start at that point and you build on that, then the world is billions of years old. But if you refute the initial tenet and the presumption, the whole structure topples. You're going nowhere. But what does the Jew believe? And I say endless times over, where do we begin? Everything we believe is not through analysis, through extrapolation, through evaluation, but it's through hardcore fact, irrefutable fact. How do we know he's Rishon? How do we know he's the creator? How do we know anything? It all goes back to the Sinai event. During that day, when God openly communicated with every Jew, and prophecy is something a person doesn't prophesize through his physical mind, through the brain. It's straight to the soul. The soul is a spiritual entity. The soul has an unlimited capacity. David HaMelech, King David, was able to comprehend in Torah in one night what another person would take 100 years. How's it possible? Because within the finite, you're limited to time and space. Within the spiritual, time and space means nothing. In a moment, you're able to amass knowledge that takes 100 years to amass. So that knowledge that was communicated to David was through prophecy. As a result of that, what he was able to come upon and comprehend in a night, it took another person 100 years to comprehend. Couldn't live long enough years to comprehend that. That's what it is. So when we speak about creation, and God is the creator, what normally takes billions of years means nothing. And we were at Sinai. God revealed to us within that short period of time, when we've taken as his people, he gave us all the fundamentals, every conceivable tenet, which is the basis for all our beliefs and our religion, were communicated on that day to every Jew. So we were able to comprehend and amass, and those few hours of communication may take 1,000 years to amass, but it's even beyond that. It's not only quantitative, it's qualitative. It's things that are impossible to know unless you know it. And they're refutable because it's directly from the source. I once had a conversation with the person I always quote, the professed atheist. And he says to me, Rabbi, I want to ask you a question. And I'm able to prove to you that there's no God, and you can't answer me, and you can't respond to my proof. Would you accept there is no God? That's the question he put to me. I said, no. He says, why? But you're a logical person. I said, I'll tell you the reason. I said, my belief doesn't begin with my intellect. My belief begins with fact, because we have tradition, which we trace back, going back 3,400 years. That God appeared to every Jew and communicated to every Jew through prophecy, his reality, what his reality is. That's where I begin. And prophecy is not something you imagine. There's nothing more real and more factual, more concrete. So it's at such an irrefutable level, there's nothing compared to it. That's where I begin. That's my tradition. Because the 4 million Jews who were at Sinai shared this with their children, and it's an unbroken chain till today. So of course, my intellect and what I study, what I understand, reinforces that fact, that reality. But if you should ask me a question, which I can't respond to, I may not have an answer to that question, but it doesn't refute my reality. Because my reality is not based on my intellect, but rather it's based on fact. So how do we know God is Rishon? He's the first. How do we know he's the creator? Whatever Rambam over here codifies within these 13 tenets, how do we know any of this information is accurate and concrete and cogent beyond the word of compelling and cogent? Because every one of us, our souls were there, but our ancestors were there. And that's something which they received from God himself, and that was passed down. So how do I know Hashem is Rishon? God is Rishon. He's the first. Everything emanates from him. That goes back to Sinai. Hu Achron. He's the last. What means the last? I mean, God can't have any competition. He's the first and the last. So the question is like this: if we ourselves merit resurrection with God's help, we should be privileged. And we're going to be in the future world, in the 8,000th year, when God will recreate existence. If we will be there with God's help. Rishon, we understand. Ex nihilo, nothing existed except God. But at the end of the day, God promised us we're part of eternity. So part of eternity, we're also Achron. We're also there. So that this tenet is God is Rishon and Achron. He's the first and the last. So how do you respond to this? I think it's a very strong question to ask. And the tenet, he's first and he's last. Whenever we speak about finite, is whatever even we merit and we're privileged to be part of eternity, we being part of eternity, we're still finite. God is infinite. So if there's no beginning, there's no end. He's first and he's last. Because there's no end to him. We, even though we may be associated with that, but God still goes beyond that. Because whatever eternity is relating to us, that only has relevance because of our association with God. But God himself is infinite, so he goes beyond that. I'll give you an example. You have a person who's 100 feet tall, theoretically, and you're 6 feet tall. And he walks, or he lifts you up to the top of his physicality. So how are you? How high are you? You're on par with him. But why are you with him? Because he chooses to carry along with him. But look, you're able to see what he sees. Because you're in the same line of vision as he is. But why are you up there? Because he's holding you up there. But God is even beyond that. Even when we're associated with him, as part of eternity, he's still beyond that. Because God is infinite. There's no beginning, there's no end. It's re-establishing, reconfirming this reality of God's eternity, which I told you the words that express this in the Zohar are Ein Sof. There's no end to God. He just keeps, we can't even imagine or fathom what means forever. Even forever doesn't mean infinite. Because forever is with a concept of what we're able to relate to. How could it be infinite? It has to end somewhere. It does not end. It doesn't end. Space ends somewhere, whatever it is. It may not be within our grasp to be able to comprehend where it ends, but it ends. Human being naturally, especially when we want to understand something, the visual is very important. The imagination is important. But Moshe Rabbeinu forewarns the Jews before he passes away, don't think for a moment that you're able to visualize God in any form or shape or context whatsoever. You can't. But a human being has that need. So how do I relate to God? He is. He's what? All powerful, almighty. What we see is only the manifestation of his almighty, which is existence. We see the heavens. He's almighty. David says, Hashemayim misaber kod kol. Heaven speaks God's glory. You look at the stars, the galaxies, it's not imaginable. Look at the oceans, the depths of the oceans, the species in the oceans. A whale, one whale, a blue whale, 60 tons of whale. It's not to be imagined. And you have multiple such things. And that's only a small infinitesimal part of creation. And additionally, he created what we call the Leviathan, the Leviathan. Originally, it was created a male and a female. God killed one of them because if they would have procreated, they would have destroyed the world. Therefore, God had to take one out. It shouldn't be able to procreate. Could we relate to this? So if that's the Leviathan, that would have destroyed the world. So what's God? It's like you go to God, unfortunately, you have people who are retarded, and you give them a question in advanced physics and say, figure it out. And you're standing there and you have a superior IQ, and you say to the one who's giving this very sophisticated formula to this retarded child who's at 40 IQ, figure it out. You say, what are you trying to do? You expect him to figure it out? He's retarded. He has limited intelligence. How could he figure it out? You have superior, you can figure it out. I don't care what kind of superior intelligence you have. You have King Solomon's intelligence. You can't figure out God because you're this limited, retarded, it's not retarded, limited intellectual that your intellect cannot fathom as the retarded child or human being cannot fathom to even begin approaching the issue, whatever it may be. But we're going to figure it out. How are you going to figure it out? When we go and delve into nature, you know what it's supposed to do for us? We're supposed to be amazed. Amazed. And when you're amazed, what do you say? If this is God's doing, what's God? This is divine genius. That's what you're supposed to be impressed with. This is an eye-opener to have an inkling of who God is. I am number one in Forbes. You know what I control? My portfolio. And this. Therefore what? But who's God? The problem is all you see is yourself. You don't see beyond yourself. You see these scientists? I pay their salaries. I pay for all their most advanced, sophisticated equipment. Who do you think pays for it? The Gates Foundation. That's who pays for it. All these drug companies, pharmaceuticals, who do you think funds it? Yeah, but why are they able to come upon whatever they come upon? Who gives them the ability? Who underwrites the whole enterprise of existence? From A to Z at every level, every echelon of existence. And you want to understand who he is. The more you delve, the more you understand what you don't understand. And the more you're amazed. What exists in a leaf, what exists in a cell, multiply it infinite times over, relatively speaking. And God is beyond that. And you want to understand God's mind. All we could say, I believe with absolute faith, belief, who Rishon v'Achron. He was the first and he's the last. There's no beginning, there's no end to him. Everything emanates from him. Nothing could be outside of him. And we exist because he wills that existence. And if he's first, that means he's the causality. We are the what? We are the consequence of that causality. That's what it is. But again, as I could say, as many times as it has to be restated, reconfirmed. Where do we all begin? How could the Jews be so certain? Because we had an experience that no people in the history of this existence had. God openly, the Creator openly communicated with every one of us and told us exactly what it's all about at a level that it was emblazoned on our souls. And we had a recording called the written law, an oral law which was passed down generation until today. Do we have many things we don't understand? The Talmud says, Tishbi Yitaretz Kush Jabayis. Certain things we have to wait for Eliyahu Navi, who's referred to Tishbi, Elijah the prophet. He will elucidate things. He's the precursor to the coming of Mashiach. But once Messiah comes, who's the anointed king, who's a prophet, who's everything, he will bring clarity to all humanity and understand why God is the only power, omnipotent being, and nothing exists outside of himself.